Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Up next, we have Drew Stone from Commonwealth Labs doing The Future is Treasury-Funded. I'll let you take it from here, Drew.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Really excited to be here. It seems like there's a ton of people who are watching, and we can give you an update of what we've been up to at Edgeware and share some thoughts on some Treasury funding that's been mentioned previously throughout Sub0, but want to tell you what we're thinking of at Edgeware. So let's jump in. So the outline of this talk is going to recap the work we've done in 2020 and talk about some Treasury goals that Treasuries can have in their life cycle. Then we'll talk about streaming funding and new experiments that we can use and build to leverage Treasuries. So what have we been up to this year? It's been 2 runtime upgrades so far. We compiled roughly 5 to 6 months of work in the first Naples upgrade, which was a very large storage migration to get us into substrate release candidates with tremendous amount of help from Parity. And then recently we pushed our substrate 2.0 upgrade, which should take us to much the Inc 3.0 compatible WASM contracting system and much more. So it's a really exciting time. And I guess first wanted to give a huge shout out to a lot of the people at Parity who helped us get to this point. Definitely missing a few names, but we're very grateful for the support that Parity has provided us. They helped us tremendously get to this 2.0 upgrade, and it's been a pleasure working with them so far. So thanks especially to these people and everyone else in the organization. In addition to the help we've gotten from Parity, and through funding from our Treasury, we've also hired 2 people distributed around the globe. So we've hired Mathieu and Shankar, both serving as a range of roles within the community. Mathieu is working as a developer advocate, helping out with documentation and technical community leadership. And Shankar is working as a community manager in our social channels. So it's super interesting concept that I think you can see happening on Edgeware, where we are hiring people to work for the chain, with the chain, and with Commonwealth right now. These are a little bit about the roles that currently have hired for. So runtime contracts, documentation, community management, and developer support. This list isn't exhaustive. We're still interested if people want to contribute to Edgeware and to the greater community to fund and hire people through our Treasury. Cool. So let's jump into some Treasury goals. So in general, the Edgeware Treasury right now has over 415 million Edgeware tokens. It's a little over $3 million at today's value. We've distributed 110 million Edge. We funded 3 teams to build out a variety of work, support. Treasury has supported Commonwealth Labs in building the Edgeware node and building tooling on top. It supported seed code for their in-progress staking UI and BlockX Labs for their wallet integration. In addition, we funded a project that's been pioneered by Dylan Chen called BuildDAO, which is a incubator of sorts for cross-chain blockchain projects. So that should be growing tremendously in the next year. So stay tuned. More details on that from him. And then, yeah, we funded 2 chain hires. Cool. So here are just some interesting Treasury goals. I took this picture on the left from the United States Treasury's mission from 2018 to 2022 and sort of mapped it into maybe some idea of what the Edgeware Treasury is trying to do, as well as what other treasuries can do. I'll go into each detail, so I'll just give a second to do a little mapping. But yeah, So I guess the first note is to boost network growth. So how do we do this with our treasuries? We create jobs, which Edgeware is sort of showing firsthand how to do. We incentivize new project creation, something that I think the 7 weeks for 7 funded projects on Kusama has done a great job of pioneering. We incentivize new team formation through grants, and we support infrastructure, which in Bjorn's talk we saw there's a vast amount of infrastructure being built and new teams joining, which is pretty awesome. I only see this growing as people start leveraging the treasuries that exist in this ecosystem a lot more. Second goal is to decentralize the treasury. So right now, the Edgeware Treasury is managed by 13 council members. And over time, we would like to grow the council as well as decentralize it, or at least decentralize the management of the treasury to maybe new councils. So we'll create new collectives, allocate budgets to certain collectives, and utilize the democracy palette as well to spend from the treasury. Next is to enhance the system stability. And this is an area I do find quite interesting because a nation's treasury is used to support national security. And so I see blockchain treasuries as being crucial to supporting their own system stability and security. And what I mean by this is we should leverage these treasuries to fund audits for projects that aren't live yet or live yet. We should fund bug bounties through the treasury, and then provide stability for teams by providing them stable funding to work on tools, work on new projects. It's mostly targeted, the last item, for people building tooling and infrastructure, but to the extent that teams require stable funding, it'll be pretty important. Next, we want to promote transparency in the treasuries, so tracking inputs and outputs and analyzing accomplishments, as well as funding yearly reports of what was delivered and what wasn't and how much was spent, in general accounting matters. And then finally is to achieve operational excellence, which is one word they used in the US Treasury document. And these I see as sort of picking a basket of KPIs that will allow the Treasury to optimize for. So these could be grants being issued, grants being completed and delivered, teams staying in the community, and teams being incentivized to be here, as well as teams, how many products they're building with grants, and so on and so forth. I see this as something that everyone who's launching with treasuries can sort of collaborate on to optimize for. And that's how we build better governments and governance systems. So it's definitely useful to map these out. Awesome. So with that, I want to jump into a concept that has popped up in Parity land as well as, or Polkadot land as well as on Edgeware, and it's streaming funding. And the basic premise for streaming funding is to provide recurring funding from the treasury to a set of accounts on Substrate. The way in which it was brought up on Edgeware is to use the treasury inflation to stream into accounts. The way it was brought up on Substrate was to just handle recurring payments to and from the treasury palette to a bunch of accounts, so money that's already been minted. But both of these, regardless, provide continuous and stable funding for teams and service agreements, and reduce the amount of governance actions that council members or the democracy need to take if the system is running well. So it's something I find quite interesting, and I think the applications that leverage it are also quite interesting, and we could think a lot outside the box. So first way to utilize streaming funding is to create sort of new service level agreements. So at least with the variety of infrastructure partners and people who build tooling around this ecosystem, we can establish sort of maybe subscription-based businesses or agreements with them to build tools for that ecosystem. So for example, Gantry could provide a service to all of the Edgeware participants or the entire Edgeware community of node operators by pulling funding from the Treasury and then offering, say, some node monitoring solution to any participant who wants to prove they're a node operator of Edgeware. Other ways to do this outside of infrastructure are to pay or to pull funding, say, from a technologically or development company like Parity, who can provide support on an ongoing basis. So those are some examples, but always interested to hear more about what people can come up with. Another way to utilize streaming funding is to sort of do so in hopes of decentralizing treasuries. So we will stream money into smaller collectives who themselves have, say, similar governance right now to the council. This is just an easy way to, say, agree at the top level of where funding should be streamed into and allocated, so that at the bottom level, they can receive funding and decide how to govern it. So it's sort of automated execution at the top through meta governance decisions, and then hands-on execution at the bottom, which right now is what we deal with at the top. Obviously, we only get here by growing these communities, so don't solve a problem without present a solution without a problem. Other ways of using streaming funding is for chain hires and contractors, since these people do rely on stable funding. So by allowing them into a set where they're always being paid, at least guaranteed for a minimum amount of time, is pretty useful for certain types of workers. The output of certain grants doesn't always match the lifestyle of certain people. So the way I see it is a more expressive mechanism, covers more bases, and allows people to sort of create new roles for themselves or create new ways of using funding. Awesome. And then finally, I want to talk about some new experiments. They've kind of been touched upon in the earlier side of the talk, but how do we utilize Treasury funding for decentralized applications? We could utilize streaming funding or not, just Treasury funding in general, to incentivize liquidity mining. So we use inflation to provide those incentives instead of minting, say, new governance tokens. So you can maybe provide liquidity over existing pairs without creating a governance token. If what you're trying to do is just incentivize liquidity, we can stream funding over bridges into new ecosystems for other projects. And maybe something that could be interesting, at least in the Edgeware community and the greater substrate community, is to create developer and project UBIs, so that projects that maybe pass an initial governance phase get some initial funding that's provided by treasuries. Developers themselves can also sort of leverage this. And then second is using treasury funding for security, which I do find very interesting. We could stream funding to audit companies through new blockchain-based service level agreements, so that these service companies provide a continuous, say, audit stream for the products being built on a blockchain. We can seed a new project's reserves for bug bounties, and we can also leverage the Treasury to purchase insurance-based products for the dApps on its platform. And this would basically provide cover against the system itself, falling apart, which seems to be, it's pretty interesting to me. I'd love to see something like that. Seems to be happening in the Ethereum land. But yeah, those are some thoughts and ideas. I know I just blazed through the talk, but if you're interested to participate please reach out. Go to our website, follow us on Twitter. We are actively hiring at Edgeware for Rust developers. So if anyone wants to get involved, you can reach out to me. My email is drew@commonwealth.im. And if you're interested also in chain hires, it's something we would love to speak about and help craft a role for you. So yeah, thanks so much. Thanks everyone for having us.
Thanks, Drew. We have a little bit of time for Q&A. There's one question here. Can you say a bit more about the storage migration and how do storage migrations work?
For sure. Yeah, so a little bit of history. Edgeware launched in February, and our first runtime upgrade went through somewhere around June or July or August. Might have to look at the date, but somewhere like 4 or 5 months after launch. And by this point, all of the structure of the storage of the runtime had changed. So what we had to do is effectively migrate all of the keys in our storage for most of the modules for the runtime palettes to the new structure. So this goes through everything in storage. You have to migrate it to a new hash function, a new key. In addition to that, we had to migrate directly every single account that was on Edgeware prior to the upgrade, so that people could spend their money afterwards. And I know today that we've migrated every account successfully. It's just been a fun sort of scavenger hunt, finding the last bits of accounts that weren't. But yeah, let me know if that answered your question.
Great. There's no more questions in the Ask the Question function. But if people want to connect further with Drew, you can catch him on Discord. Thank you so much, Drew. We'll move into our next session now.
Awesome. Take care, everyone.